You're listening to the Be Better Off Show by Kelly+Partners.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Be Better Off Show, where we get interesting Australians who can share information to help you be healthier, wealthier and wiser and drive your business. This morning, we've got the co-founder, owner and creative director at La La Land, 2009 to the present. He's been running this business, and that's over 10 years, which, as any small business owner knows, if you can stay in business more than 10 minutes, you're doing pretty well. This is Elie Azzi from La La Land. Good morning, Elie.
Hi, good morning. And yeah, thanks for having me. This is fun.
Yeah, it's a fun thing to do on a rainy Sydney Friday morning. Now, Elie, you started this business in 2009, but I always love to start at the beginning. Where were you born? How, did you have brothers and sisters, schooling? And then how did you start your career and then ultimately end up in the business?
Do you want the long version or the short version?
Yeah, give us the long version.
Okay. Well, I was actually born in Lebanon. My parents were immigrants from a war-torn country. They fled from Lebanon in the 1980s, and we came to Australia with nothing. They couldn't speak English, and I was only 2 years old. So we I know that they struggled a lot in the early kind of years being in a foreign country. And then growing up, I grew up in Southwest Sydney. And from there, done my schooling. And then my first job, then I studied at university communications. I actually always wanted to be a fashion designer, but my parents wouldn't let me at the time. They insisted that there was no money in fashion. And if I want to make some serious money, that I should be, being an accountant like you, or maybe an engineer or a lawyer. And so I kind of said, okay, fine, I won't get into fashion. I'll get into something like communications, which could potentially help me if I one day decide to start, something in fashion. But while I was studying at university, the job that I had while studying was in fragrances and cosmetics. I used to work for YSL fragrances and cosmetics. I don't know if when you walk into the department stores on the level of usually on the ground level. And I did that for quite a long time because, throughout my whole university degree, that was the job that I had. And the first year after uni, I couldn't find a job. So I was still working in retail. But the best part of that was the training that I received. The YSL had really, really good training. There was a guy there, his name was Valentino. I'll never forget him because he was the one who planted certain seeds in my head about, positive thinking, reaching goals that you think that you can't. Obviously, his intention was for us to sell more, but it really helped me personally believe and know that anything is possible, even if, and when it came to training in cosmetics and fragrances, there was always so much storytelling and branding, and, luxury fragrances and brands always really sold the story. It wasn't about the content of what's inside the bottle, but it was about the experience or how that fragrance or scent made you feel. So early on, I learned about how branding and marketing works in a very kind of deep psychological level. They called fragrances was always like the last accessory you would put on, after getting ready. This was a time back when fragrances and cosmetic, like fragrances in particular, was quite a luxurious purchase. I mean, now we've got, Chemist Warehouse and Priceline, and you can just go in and buy a $20 bottle. But back in the early 2000s, it was an experience to walk into a department store and be consulted by someone to work out who you're buying the present for, what your particular kind of personality is and what fragrance will suit you. So I did a lot of that training. And my first job out of uni was working for a Japanese company. They're huge in Japan, and they had just first started their first project in Australia outside of Japan, and they did luxury bedding and bed linen. And they decided to open up a distribution and a showroom in Sydney because that when they were discovering or researching the best quality wool in the world, Australia had the best quality wool, and the Japanese were, this particular company was so, they had, everything had to be 10 out of 10 in terms of quality. So they had this existing relationship in Australia. So they started this new project. Look, it was a huge flop. It was not successful. They were very famous in Japan, but we couldn't get it up and running in Australia. We were advertising in Vogue Living, and we had a beautiful showroom, but the bedding was quite expensive, and no one understood, the brand or knew of the brand, and they weren't willing to invest in marketing. And anyways, it was a political and complex situation, and they made me redundant working for them after a year and a half. And so it was a very short time I was working for them, and I was kind of really upset because I thought my heart was so committed to this brand, although I hardly knew them anyway. But there was this one product that I really liked. It was these, because they did everything to do with bedding, but they had these floor cushions that the Japanese traditionally would sit on. They're called zabutons, and they were liquidating all their stock. So I decided to buy all their leftover cushions, thinking, oh, here I could continue selling these and start my little project on the side. I was telling a friend at the time who I met in Myers and David Jones, and she was like, oh, I'll do it with you. Let's do it together. And so we did. We started trying to sell these cushions, and it's so funny because years and years later, we still had those bloody cushions. We could not sell them, but they initiated the first kind of ever project business for us.
So when did you start La La Land after that?
No, we were importing brands. So she figured, because she was a French lady, and she was like, look, why don't we import some brands from France, where I'm from, while we sell these cushions? So it's not just cushions, we've got like a bit of a catalog. So we're importing, designer-esque kind of cool, edgy homewares and gifts. And so we started off with like 6 different brands. And the margin was so small. They were so expensive. We barely made any money. But the good thing with that kind of experiment was it allowed us to kind of learn what sold and what didn't. I mean, like I said, the cushions didn't sell ever. I ended up, I think, selling them for 20 cents each to a lady who made cushion covers. And so but there was one brand that kind of stood out, and they were very colorful and quirky, and they were publishing French artists. So we got permission from them to publish Australian artists, because we figured, why should we be spending all this time and money and not making any money promoting French artists while there's so much talent here in Australia. So that's how La La Land started, and it worked. Over time, we kind of started to get some good artists, some international artists, so the business started in 2007, but the brand actually started in 2009.
And how did you come up with the brand name?
Well, at the time, the artworks, the look and feel of the artworks were very whimsical, almost slightly dark. If anyone kind of still has a La La Land card out there from those days, they weren't as refreshing and colorful as they are now. They were kind of almost ethereal. And so I chose the name because I felt like La La Land kind of represented a space or a time, almost like a parallel universe that kind of is different to where you live, now. And so that was the idea, is that it's a dreamlike.
So when you start trying to find artists, what was your first product?
Greeting cards, because they were the lowest cost. We didn't have to invest much. And it was, La La Land was definitely not an overnight success. It took so long.
Where did you sell your greeting cards, the first bunch of them?
The first, where?
Yeah.
Well, I was...
It's like there's not a big online channel in 2009.
No, it was always in boutique gift shops, and we're still predominantly in boutique gift shops. We're quite lucky in Australia. There are a lot of them. Australians love shopping outside, and so we couldn't get into the big boys in shopping centers, but we did. We were able to get into the small businesses. Look, the first kind of like 7 years, honestly, 7 years, that's how long it took. I was in my car driving all over Australia.
I was just going to ask, so who did the distribution? Did you do the distribution yourself?
Well, yeah, I did the selling. So I was the salesman. I had a suitcase full of samples and I was literally door knocking, not homes, but door knocking to shops and talking to shop owners. And I would fly from city to city and drive, with my rental car everywhere. And it was so hard. I mean, it was so hard because I got rejected so many times. Like I wouldn't make appointments because I knew they wouldn't accept the appointment. So I just showed up, and they could tell I was a salesman. They could tell my, my bags. Straight away, they'll look at me. There were moments where I'll walk out and I would cry. I'll be like, what am I? Like the person would have been so rude to me, or I would question why I'm still doing this. Like why? What like I wasn't earning anything. Like it was so hard for me financially. I'll never forget going to an ATM and not being able to pull out $20, and I was working my ass off. Where
were you living, Elie, at the time?
So at the time, the first few years I was still at my parents.
I was going to say, were you living at home or you're renting a place?
No, I was living at my parents, and then later I met someone and was in a partnership, and I was living with him in Summer Hill in the West. So I did that for a few years, and he was so supportive, and he kind of, I wasn't paying rent, but I was buying the food, and we kind of negotiated this thing where I was still supporting him, but I was so poor. And I was working all these long hours, just trying to get more and more sales. But I truly believe that the success I have today was largely to do with working as a salesman, because I learned so early what sold and what didn't, what customers wanted. What I would observe people walking around in a little boutique shop trying to see what they would pick up and what they didn't, and it really taught me the selling part, the customer experience part of it. And I think it wasn't like I invested in a brand and then started a brand without having any experience in the industry. I worked up really, really slowly.
Yeah. So you're 7 years to 2016. If we fast forward to today, how big's the company? And for our listeners to sort of compare, like over 16 years now, how does that look?
We're not a huge business. We're very successful now compared to before. We're an established iconic brand. We're turning over around 6 million. So it's, we've got a long way to go. We've got 10 staff in a little office in Bondi. We're in Myers and Peter Alexander, which was a huge kind of exciting kind of breakthrough into the industry, because finally we were being taken seriously and the product was becoming well known. We've always been referred to as one of the pioneers of the Australiana trend. And I always, to me, that makes me so happy, because we truly were, we were one of the first brands to support Australian artists and really get the Australiana theme of flora and fauna, out there without looking touristy or cheesy. It wasn't like a souvenir range that you would see in a tourist shop. We were promoting Australian flora and fauna and illustrations and collections so early on. Now, I mean, of course, you walk into Myers or David Jones and you'll see Australiana everywhere. But we were, I think, the first brand to really kind of put it on giftware and homewares, and it did well. So
like, if you think of that, often when, I love, there's a great business book called Shoe Dog by the founder of Nike. And the reason I love it so much is he spends basically 95% of the book telling the story sort of up to the public listing of the company.
Right.
It was like 30 years ago, right? And he's just talking about going door to door, selling these shoes, doing trade shows, raising the money, running it on his credit card, getting his finance pulled, getting screwed by the Japanese supplier, having to find a new one.
Right.
And it's gritty and ugly and nasty and tough. But it's the story, often people will look at the story that people hear about a business is the story sort of 20 years after the hard work was done. And the story the founders often tell is kind of the highlight reel, not the grittiness required. And I totally agree with you that that door to door, 7 years, meeting the customers, observing who's buying what and deeply understanding the business. You can't do it in 7 minutes. There's no shortcut to that depth of understanding. And it gives a business, I think, a real foundation that, I think behind every strong business is that depth of understanding, which is really, really interesting. So when you've got 10 people now, but that transition from where you're feeling like, there's not $20 in the ATM, when did you start to feel like you had a bit of foundation, a bit of a momentum? Is there a point where you felt the sort of what we call a flywheel sort of starting to move? Was there a big account or big sales, or when did you get that belief that, hang on, I've got something here?
Look, I think it was at trade shows. Trade shows was the best opportunity for us to showcase our new collections. And when we see people's reaction, like in this case, trade shows is, people, store owners, other store owners. And when we see their reaction and them loving the product that we've spent over 6 months designing and producing, I think in that moment, I feel such an accomplishment, because I'm not a numbers person. And so I've never been good at, accounting like you are, or my partner is actually an accountant as well. And, I've never been good at looking at numbers and seeing that. I always have to see people's reaction to things and then feel really good. I mean, of course, when I see that, sales are doing really well, that makes me so happy and makes me feel accomplished and relieved. But it's more about customer experiences and knowing that that people are liking and resonating with
totally. The numbers come after. Like at a trade show, you see that reaction, and you're going to know what the numbers kind of are going to end up looking like when you see very happy customers.
Yeah, and I think another kind of timing was when we launched more into our homewares. So when we didn't stop, but when we introduced, melamine plates and notebooks, or when we kind of grew out of the greeting cards, and that was successful. That was a moment as well where I was like, oh, thank God. Like it's.
Yeah. So you come up with the plates and the trays.
Yeah.
How do you, carriage is a big part of life. How did you get that idea, and how confident were you that anyone would buy them? How big was your first order?
Well, we always looked at our best-selling greeting cards, and we knew that, okay, well, in fact, that's how the Australiana theme started. We had all these greeting cards, and then when you analyze the sales of them, and we go, okay, people seem to really like this artwork and this artwork and this artwork. So to us, that was reason or kind of indication as to, okay, those are more likely to sell well on a plate because across other products. So we were at an advantage because the risk didn't feel as high as for other brands. The greeting cards always gave us an indication, if that made sense. And the greeting cards being a low cost item were less risk.
Yeah, totally. It's a great way to test customer reaction with a low cost item rather than go out and build a heavy product that costs a lot of money that no one wants, which is really interesting. Are you still big in greeting cards? Is it still a part of your business?
Yeah, greeting cards is what I describe our bread and butter. We're quite well known for our greeting cards. I still meet people that would recognize the cards, but have no idea that we do all these other things. Yeah, I think cards also appeal to a much wider market because everyone needs a greeting card, and you don't want to look cheap buying a $1 card. So you kind of buy a nice card, no matter where you're from or who you are or how much you earn, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. Now, the parents, how do they feel now you've found your fashion designing career? I've heard this story, by the way, Ellie, 100 times, where mum and dad were like, nah, you can't do that. Go and get a real job. Hugh Jackman, probably the most famous. His father was a partner in an accounting firm. And then he went off to do communications, similar to yourself. And then he did acting school while he was there, and then went off to Whopper, and then he became a movie star. So it's not an uncommon route that somebody says, go and learn how to do something that looks apparently economically useful. What do they say now?
Now, I honestly, only in the last few years, only recently have they changed their kind of perception and going, oh wow, you're doing well, Elie. Before they still couldn't get their heads around it. They still couldn't. They kept saying, work with your brother-in-laws. They run really successful companies. Why are you wasting your time selling bits and pieces to, and they just couldn't understand that I had no passion for all these other industries. Yeah, that could be money making, but my heart was really stuck on the purpose of our brand. Like I was so committed to inspiring happiness and creativity while supporting artists and illustrators. And I really believed that our products were making a difference to other small businesses, helping them also, bringing happiness into the recipient of the gift, the person receiving the gift. And in my mind, it was all this good stuff, these good experiences, these positive experiences. And my parents could not get their heads around it because, they're very much Lebanese wogs, they really just needed to see me driving a luxury car to appreciate that, okay, my son is doing well, but it was never the case,
It's really interesting because today, it's easier for people to find stories of how people have been able to combine their own real passion for what they're doing and turn it into a business. Even in the past where that was the case, it was hard for people to find those stories. So I think a lot of previous generations, they didn't really know those stories, but it's probably always been the case in your space. Like Giorgio Armani started his brand at 45.
Wow. Yeah.
He wasn't a young guy, and built a business that, was quite different to what you traditionally do in that space. So it's really interesting. Now, you said that when the business started, the art was more ethereal and darker.
Yeah.
Today I think of it as joyful and happy.
Yeah.
Was that because you got happier, or how did that happen?
No, I mean, at the beginning, we wanted to be different, and that was our point of difference. The illustrations were truly kind of dark, and they would sell. People kind of appreciate that kind of whimsy, kind of darkness to them. What happened was I would always constantly look at, it wasn't me feeling or changing my perception of what I thought was trendy. It was looking at sales, always analyze. I was obsessed with analyzing sales. So slowly it was an organic growth into looking at what people were choosing and growing that. So if I noticed that this particular kind of, at the time, for example, many years ago, owls were very popular. People loved illustrations of owls. So I'll be like, okay, this is working. So let's just do more owls, for example, or more woodland animals, so you kind of extend it to a deer or whatever. This is just a very simple example. So for me, it was my constant analyzing of sales. And that's how I figured out what the slow progress of and the slow evolution of what was very dark to what's now very colorful. Now I'm scared to go beige, because we're so well known for being so colorful. We, just recently we had a trade show and we launched our very first kind of collection, which is called Field Trip, which is very earthy, boho kind of. The customer in mind that I had while we were designing this range was like the customer that had linen cushions, that wore linen dresses, that, that very earthy, which Australians kind of love.
Yeah,
and
very boring.
And I was so scared that this range wouldn't do well because we're not normally known for that look, but it did. And now that I know that it did, it would allow me as a creative director to go, okay, where can we take this further and not look so same, how do we keep it looking unconventional? And this is the key thing to the collections, is the finding that magic kind of balance of something looking commercial and at the same time unique. So unique enough where people haven't seen it before, but they've seen elements where it's something that they can identify with. And that's, and I think music is very much like that. You've got great artists that don't.
Yeah, music and art's like that, Elie.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Like, I think the musicians are trying to do their thing and stay true to themselves, but they have to evolve, even if people want them to sing, they're global number one.
Exactly.
They've still got to innovate. Otherwise, they don't feel that they're still a creator.
Yeah.
Very interesting in art. Ken Doan's a good example of somebody with a really famous look. But if you walk through his gallery, see his collection or read his books, he's done lots of other work that isn't seen as him,
Right.
But you can't be an artist for 60 years and paint the same painting, right?
Exactly. And the artists that do, their sales don't evolve, just like the artworks are not evolved, if that makes sense. I've seen, because I deal with so many artists, and I've seen some that are so stuck to where they were, and they haven't moved on from that look, and they haven't been, they haven't grown as much as other artists that you really have seen an evolution, that you've seen them transform. And that's where, they're not afraid to take risks, but, remain true to themselves, like you said, in music.
Yeah, it's for the artists in particular, it's a very difficult one. There's a great, I think it's a Netflix special on modern art that says, it's called like, what's that art worth or something? And it follows a Sotheby's director sort of going through modern art, and they follow some artists that were massive in the 70s with people like Andy Warhol, and they show who his contemporaries were that were higher selling artists, and how when they changed from producing what they were known for to evolving, how they go and see one guy in the wilderness, and he spent like 30 years with no one buying his paintings. And since this special, his paintings have gone, up in value by, I don't know, 50 or 100 times.
Wow.
But he was just explaining that, well, I had to keep evolving. And a lot of modern art is collected as a status symbol. So if you have a Warhol on your wall, the people that buy them want people to know it's a Warhol.
Yeah, of course.
And so these artists get pigeonholed and stuck. It's helpful if they die, because then they don't change. So Basquiat and these sorts of guys who he painted, and then that's what everyone knows what he painted, because he died.
It's kind of like the opposite to what I just said.
But it's hard. And then the best ones at doing it in fashion are like Louis Vuitton are famous for keeping their heritage, but trying to innovate over the top of it, so they can do things with their brand and flex it and keep it interesting.
Yeah, and I think they do that successfully, because they find that balance of innovation, but still keeping the pattern or the symbols that they know customers like, because of what it reflects, the status that it reflects. People want everyone to know that they're wearing it.
That's what you reminded me of when you were speaking, is that they get modern artists all the time, to Jeff Koons and all sorts of people drawing over the top of their stuff.
Yes.
But they keep trying to keep the heritage of their, I guess, what was essentially a travel product, which is interesting. So what's the future? If you look forward, have you ever been a person that makes a 6-month plan in fashion that's so fast moving, or a 5-year plan? Where are you selling outside of Australia now? Do you see a future for the company evolving sort of multi-channel globally, or what's your hope for the business?
So we've got a distributor in New Zealand and one in America. The one in America is quite small, and they focus on our greeting cards. The challenge with export is always the price points, because it's always been expensive for us to, the freight to export, and the collections, that people don't know the brand overseas. But that is an objective to get into maybe the UK, to kind of start there. Or I also obviously will expand the brand, and my goal has always been for more and more Australians to know of us, to appreciate us, to kind of experience the La La Land experience of our illustrations and the magic that our artworks create. And the way we do that is to obviously sell more online, but it's not just the sale, but it's the experience, connecting with them through our socials, connecting with the people through in-store experiences. I would love to get more involved with that kind of interaction, so it's not just a purchase, but it's an experience. And I would like to, we're looking at starting a new sub brand, which finally is in fashion. I'm finally getting to where my teenage dream is. So we're looking at using the illustrations that we have and sell and people appreciate, and putting them on fabric and seeing how that looks. And that's the dream. That's the plan anyway.
You remind me so much of one of my favorite artists is a lady, Christina Williamson, out of England, who's done work with all sorts of people, but she's got wallpapers and fabrics and cushions and lounges, and very, real innovation around applications of the work.
Right.
Really did all the illustrations of all the Penhaligon fragrances. I don't know if you've seen the Penhaligon range, but she did all those.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, so yeah, very very interesting. It's done walls in um, hotels and illustrations of people's lives, and just very interesting flexibility around what you're doing.
And that's the thing, you've got such unlimited ways of applying an artwork. You can apply it on a rug, like you said, on wallpaper, and yeah, that's what excites me is, where can we see these illustrations more and more on. And yeah, we'll get more into fashion. We have already, even at La La Land, without the other brand. Another thing that I'm really excited about doing more of is like big collaborations, like with
I was just going to say, I could see collabs in your future.
Yeah. I mean, like we already like do license ranges, which you can kind of arguably say a collaborations, like with Streets and Smiley, Matildas, the soccer team.
Yeah.
But what I imagine and I'm hoping for is like maybe an opportunity to collaborate with another brand that does completely different products, but where we design kind of limited edition packaging or something that where we both kind of succeed or kind of benefit from.
Yeah, totally. You remind me very much of the Italian Fornasetti brand.
And I love that brand.
Yeah, and I think what he's done is, and that I think that's one of the world's great brands in terms of great rugs and applications of their art in very high quality, very interesting ways.
Yeah, I love the range and the collection, and it's fascinating how they have been so successful at reinventing a face. It's just a face, but it's done in so many different ways, and people haven't been sick of it. Like people love and like what that face does, and
very quirky art in a quite modernist art, but put on often very classic items in a very high quality way.
That's right. Yeah, and quality for us too is so important, just to keep the customer coming back, so you're not just selling cheap shit. That it's something that's long lasting. It's just as
so for you, like sustainability, I guess in all fashion seems, I think is a huge challenge. People want to know where the product comes from, how long it's going to last, whether it becomes landfill. Have you thought around sort of circular economy, recycling, sustainability, supply chain? How does that impact you guys?
So we've been kind of actively working towards achieving better sustainability. For us, at the moment, our kind of cause or intention with our products is when we launch products, we always try to launch products that have a strong reusable factor. So, we've got reusable shopping bags. We're one of the first brands to really promote and create reusable shopping bags.
Yeah, my wife has one, guys. So anyone listening, she's got one. It's in such good quality. Like this sort of bag that I've got here, she's got a very bag, and it's such good quality that you want to use it because
it carries so much.
Carries a ton of stuff. It's strong. I overfill my bags.
So reusable shopping bags, reusable coffee cups, our melamine plate sets, which is like picnic plate sets or for pizza plate sets. We really encourage our customers to use those instead of plastic plates or paper plates. And so we always trying to think in that way, like what do people use every day that we could kind of give them so they don't have to throw them out. But in saying that, we're trying our hardest to kind of look at other ways, innovative ways, maybe with materials. It's a challenge. I'm going to be like honest with you. It's so hard because often, some products, I'll give you an example. Like people often think that bamboo is better for the environment than melamine. But when you look into it, the amount of chemicals and the energy that, it takes to create that bamboo plate is actually just as bad as a melamine plate. So it's about not just being fake about it and saying, oh, we're doing bamboo, not melamine, and hoping that people won't ever know, and that's the challenge. Look, it's complicated and it's a long process. And I think we are, heavily kind of focusing on that. And I think over the years we'll improve in, small things like packaging, using, paper packaging as opposed to the foam, or things like, transport, freight. And we don't promote it much because I don't feel like we've got to a point where we've we've really been successful. For us, it's still been a journey and a process. And once we figure it out, then we could really start showing it off. But our envelopes, another thing is our envelopes are made from recycled paper, and even the ink that we use is environmentally friendly on all the greeting cards. So yeah, there's lots of little things, more than one big thing.
Yeah, and that's like frankly, the process of life and business and everything else. There's no silver bullet, and it's often, I think, the sustainability question is made too simplistic. It's not easy to do everything all at once, particularly for a smaller business.
Yeah.
Even the very, very large businesses don't have the resource to solve all of these problems because, we have to be realistic that often there's not an immediate short-term solution, but at least people are conscious of it. And to your point, any product that lasts longer and is less disposed of and creates less of a disposable mentality, I think makes a real contribution, frankly, which is awesome. Mate, really great to get together. I've deliberately not spoken about COVID, which I'm very proud of myself, as well people know. I'm deliberately ignoring that. I want to congratulate you on building out the business. Guys, go to social media, have a look on Instagram, find La La Land, go and buy some products. I've really enjoyed bringing Elie's story to you today, and I hope that's encouraged you in your business. I appreciate your honesty, Elie. I think anyone who hears the story of a founder and how hard it is to get going, I hope everyone remembers that sometimes you go to the ATM when you start a business and there's not $20 in there. But that's okay, right? You get by, and that you don't need a luxury car to impress your mum.
No,
and
I still don't have
apologies to mum, right? Not that there's anything wrong with a nice car if that turns you on, but first things first, got to get the food and all the rest of it sorted. Mate, so nice to meet you. I really appreciate your time.
Likewise. Thank you.
As I love to say, have a great day.
Thank you. And thanks for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. It's been good.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Be Better Off Show. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and review on Apple Podcasts.
Have a great day.